Philosophy and politics are complicated subjects that intertwine and diverge in many different ways. And I don't intend to cover every nuance in this video, but on the surface they appear to be two very different things. Philosophy deals with the nature of knowledge and reality, while politics is more specifically about governments and societies and international relations. But they do have some similarities. They're both stereotypically characterized by old white dudes sitting in a big room yelling at each other, and they both involve analyzing and talking about problems, both hypothetical and practical. They both require deep thinking and earnest debate. So in theory, strategies for philosophical discussion could carry over to political discussion. But in practice, these conversations are generally carried out in very different ways. Hi, I'm T1J.
Follow me.
By the way, I also have an Instagram. It kind of sucks, but you can follow me there too. So in the realm of political discourse, there's an idea known as the principle of charity. This is basically the suggestion that when you're in a discussion or a debate with someone, you should assume, at least initially, that they are a rational person. And you should consider the strongest, most charitable interpretation of the argument that they're making. I personally like to call this the most people aren't lunatics strategy. The reason for this is that if you avoid uncharitable interpretations, you're very unlikely to misrepresent someone else's position, and subsequently are very unlikely to end up attacking a straw man. Now, the straw man is probably the most commonly used fallacy in online discussions and maybe discussions in general, which leads me to believe that most of us are pretty bad at adhering to the principle of charity. And I think that this is partly because we're taking our cues from politicians and not philosophers. In political debates, the principle of charity is virtually unheard of. Politics is often more about winning than finding truth. And also, political debates are often done in front of an audience of some kind. So it can be useful to make your opponent look as disagreeable as possible to make yourself look better by comparison. So in order to achieve that, a different strategy is used. What's the opposite of charity? Basically the principle of whatever that is. In fact, people sometimes go out of their way to assume the most uncharitable version of someone's argument. Like, I made a video not too long ago that suggested that some racial dating preferences might be based on cultural bias, and I still got a whole bunch of comments that were like, it ain't racist to have a preference. Yeah, I didn't say it was. One of the most notable differences between politics and philosophy is that people tend to identify very strongly with their political beliefs. It doesn't really work that way for philosophical worldviews. Like, you never see anyone with a bumper sticker or a t-shirt that says, I'm a Kantian moral deontologist. But you see plenty of people who seem to start all of their sentences with a phrase like, as a libertarian centrist, I believe. This is especially the case when it comes to social issues, which in my opinion are inevitably tied to politics. People wear Black Lives Matter or feminist as fuck t-shirts, but I don't think I've ever seen an existentialist lives matter or a determinist as fuck t-shirt until now, because I can. Gotta love the internet. Now, of course, this is partly because most political and social issues have more of a direct impact on our lives than most philosophical questions, but I'd argue that it's also because political leaders benefit from encouraging this kind of ideological loyalty. And as a result, this infects the way that we talk about political subjects. Since winning is often more important than finding truth, being right takes a back seat to being persuasive. In college, I studied philosophy for a couple of years, and literally one of the very first classes we were required to take was a course on logic. Now, logic is basically the study of how to form good arguments. So it makes sense that you should have a good foundation in logic before diving deep into philosophical debate. Now, when you study logic, you learn about fallacies, which are argumentative styles that contain errors in reasoning. And one of the reasons that we even take the time to learn about fallacies is because, in spite of the fact that they're invalid, they can be deceptively persuasive. And because of this, political discussions are usually rife with argumentative fallacies.
30 years ago, people thought that a lot of the scientists thought that the planet was cooling, not warming. So
no, they're backed by the American Petroleum Institute and Professor Irwin Corey. Those are the people, scientists on the other side of the debate.
Once you open that debate up, then can you allow bestiality? Can you allow polygamy? And that's a whole nother conversation. I agree. Look, I'm all for gay marriage, but
people who have moral objections to gay marriage are bigots and so on, people on the right. Wait a minute, that's the same position the president had as of, a few months ago. That's the same position that Bill Clinton had.
Sometimes fallacies are used unintentionally due to ignorance or misunderstandings, but I think quite often they're used knowingly, particularly in political discussions. Because we identify so strongly with our political beliefs, we can more easily be persuaded by arguments that appeal to our biases and emotion. But appeals to emotion rarely, if ever, make for good arguments. They're kind of a red herring designed to draw your attention away from the actual issue, which is why we really need to clean up the way we talk about politics and social issues. I think that most people value logic and rational arguments to some extent, but for some reason, we often find it hard to actually use them. A lot of people seem to care more about having their biases validated or winning culture wars than actually coming closer to some kind of truth. And because of their nature, political discussions are especially prone to this kind of fallacious argumentation. And I'm not saying that philosophers are somehow infallible. This ain't Plato's aristocracy. Is that reference too esoteric? I don't know. I'm just saying perhaps we could improve political discourse by implementing the same attention to reason and logic that philosophers glorify so much. That's just me though. What do you think? Thank you for watching my video. Yes, you can really buy those t-shirts if you want to. Why not? But they'll only be available for like 10 days or something. So get one if you want. And if you missed the deadline, you can always get a That's Just Mito t-shirt, which is always available. You can find all of these at theonejanitor.com/store. I make videos about social issues, current events, and pop culture. If that sounds cool to you, click this thing right here to subscribe. And make sure you click that notification bell to make sure you never miss a video. And if you like my videos and would like to support me, click the thing next to it to check out my Patreon. And remember, stay Heiko.